What would you do if your daughter inherited $33 million and then threw you out of your own home? Would you forgive her, fight back, or disappear quietly? This isn't just a story of betrayal. It's a story of a grieving widow turned undercover warrior, a mother turned master strategist, a woman who went from discarded to empowered and took everything back with quiet strength and brutal clarity. If you love true lifestyle drama, emotional justice, family secrets, and powerful revenge arcs, then you're in the right place, because this story has more twists than a Netflix crime series, and every one of them will leave you breathless. Stay with me, because by the end of this video, you might never look at family the same way again. They say grief brings families closer, but when my husband died, grief brought out the predator in my daughter. The day she looked me dead in the eye and said, "Go find somewhere else to die, you're useless now," was the day I stopped being her mother and started becoming her reckoning. It was strange, packing my life into 2 suitcases and a shoebox of old photos. Strange how 43 years of marriage can disappear into zippered luggage in under an hour. Strange how quiet it is when your own child watches you leave like a tenant who's overstayed their welcome. Victoria didn't shed a tear. She leaned in the doorway of what used to be my home, her arms folded across her designer blouse, her eyes flicking to her watch every few seconds like she had somewhere important to be. Maybe a lunch reservation, maybe a manicure. Certainly nothing as inconvenient as a grieving mother. I stood at the threshold one last time, suitcase in each hand, and gave her a look. Not pleading, not angry, just searching. Searching for some flicker of the little girl I used to tuck into bed, but she was gone. "I heard there's a senior complex on Maple," she said flatly. "Affordable. Probably has bingo nights." And just like that, the front door closed behind me. 3 days later, I was sitting across from my late husband's lawyer and learning that everything I thought I knew about my life, my marriage, and my daughter was a beautifully crafted lie. But let me take you back for a moment. Before the betrayal, before the lies. Back when I was just Margaret Sullivan, devoted wife of 43 years, mother of 1 daughter I would have moved mountains for, and the invisible glue that held our picture-perfect family together. My husband, Robert, died of a heart attack in his favorite chair on a Thursday afternoon. He was 71, healthy as far as we knew, and gone in seconds. No warnings, no goodbyes, just silence where a heartbeat should have been. I was shattered. And Victoria? She swooped in like a well-dressed hurricane, dabbing at invisible tears and wrapping herself in grief like it was designer silk. "Mom, you can't possibly handle all this on your own," she said, her voice a honeyed weapon. "The house is too big, the stairs, the memories. It's not healthy." She tilted her head just so, like she was posing for sympathy, but her eyes? Calculating. At the time, I didn't see it. I thought she was worried about me. I thought wrong. In hindsight, every word she said came laced with an agenda. Every dinner she invited me to. Every conversation that ended with a brochure for a retirement community. Every time she mentioned how lonely the big house must be. It wasn't loneliness she feared, it was inconvenience. She brought Kevin, her husband, the investment banker, along to play good cop. "Margaret, these places are incredible. You'd have your own space, activities, new friends." What he meant was, no inheritance to split, no old woman in the way, no witnesses. I still believed I was part of the family. I still thought the home I built brick by brick with Robert's dreams was mine. Then, one Tuesday afternoon, Victoria showed up unannounced with Kevin, 2 large suitcases, and a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "We've made a decision," she said, stepping into my living room like she owned it. "Kevin got promoted. We're moving into town immediately. This house is perfect for us." I blinked. "I'm sorry." "What?" "This house," she said slowly, like I was the one with comprehension issues, "is part of what Dad left to me. The will says I inherited everything I stared at her. Victoria, there must be a mistake. Your father showed me the will years ago. No mistake, she cut me off. Dad trusted me to take care of his legacy. You were just the wife, Mom. You never understood the business side of things, the investments, the money. Just the wife. 3 words that shattered 43 years of marriage into dust. Then she said it. The words that turned my world upside down. Go find somewhere else to die. You're useless now. I didn't cry. Not then. I packed. And as Kevin loaded my bags into their luxury car, I sat quietly beside my dignity and stared out the window while my house, Robert's house, my house, her house now, disappeared in the rearview mirror. What Victoria didn't know is that grief might have broken my heart, but betrayal? Betrayal woke me up, and in just a few days, she'd be the one begging for help. Because while she was busy celebrating her stolen inheritance, I was sitting in a lawyer's office discovering that Robert had left me more than just memories. He'd left me a plan, and Victoria was about to learn. Sometimes the pawn becomes the queen. Grief is supposed to be sacred, a space where memories breathe, where love lingers long after the body is gone. But in my house, grief became a currency. And my daughter, she came to collect. After Robert passed, I didn't eat for days. I wandered the halls of our home like a ghost in my own life. His slippers were still under the bed. His mug sat on the nightstand. I couldn't bring myself to move a single thing. That was when Victoria swooped in. She arrived the day after the funeral wearing black, not out of mourning, but for dramatic effect. Her makeup was flawless, not a tear in sight. She air-kissed my cheek and tilted her head with faux compassion. "Mom, I can't imagine how hard this must be for you," she whispered, her voice smooth as velvet but colder than marble. She walked through the house like a real estate agent showing a property, stopping at the staircase. So many steps, not safe at your age. Pausing by the sunroom. So many windows. The upkeep alone must be exhausting. I smiled politely, too numb to argue. The first week she brought over meals. The second week she brought over Kevin. The third week she brought over brochures, retirement communities, senior apartments. Luxury independent living, though the luxury part ended at bingo nights and shuttle buses. At first I thought she was trying to help, that maybe this was how she processed loss by trying to fix everything. But then I started noticing the pattern. Every conversation we had was laced with subtle suggestions. You'd be so much safer in a facility. Don't you want to be around people your age? Wouldn't it be nice to not worry about maintaining this old place? Old place. She didn't call it our home, not even your home. It was an old place, an obstacle. When Kevin joined her, things escalated. "Margaret," he said one evening over dinner, "you've done such an incredible job raising Victoria. Now it's your time to relax. Let us take care of things. Let us take care of things." It sounded so kind, so generous. But I saw the flash of calculation in his eyes. Kevin is the kind of man who sees the world in terms of leverage. And right then, he saw me as a vulnerable asset ripe for liquidation. They started hosting family dinners at the house, but they weren't about family. They were about pressure. Every meal came with documents, market evaluations, downsizing plans, pamphlets from communities named things like Silver Oaks and Sunset Serenity. Victoria played her part flawlessly concerned daughter one moment, strategic predator the next. "Mom, these places are amazing," she cooed, circling a glossy photo of smiling seniors doing water aerobics. "You'll have friends." Activities. "You won't feel so alone." But I wasn't lonely. I was still in mourning. And somewhere between the suggestions and the brochures, something inside me began to stir, a quiet, simmering suspicion. Victoria was always Robert's favorite, his little princess. When she was 14 and wrecked her first car, he bought her a new one the next week. When she dropped out of her first college, he blamed the professors. When she married Kevin, a man I never fully trusted, Robert welcomed him, like the son he never had. I didn't resent her for it. at least not then. I simply played my part, the steady wife, the quiet mother, the one who held the foundation while everyone else danced on the rooftop. But as I sat across from them at dinner after dinner, watching them toast wine glasses over my grief, discussing my future like I wasn't in the room, I started to feel something I hadn't in decades: anger. It crept in slowly, a crack in the dam, until one night Victoria placed a hand on mine and said, "Mom, we've already toured some places for you. One of them has a pottery studio. You used to love that, used to?" As if my entire identity had been boxed up with the sympathy cards and memorial flowers. I smiled, and I realized something chilling. Victoria didn't see me as a person anymore, not as a mother, not as a widow, not even as family. She saw me as an inconvenience, a legal barrier between her and what she thought was her inheritance. What she didn't know, what none of them knew, was that Robert had never made a decision without thinking 10 moves ahead. He was a planner, a chess player, and I was about to learn just how well he'd planned for this moment. 3 days later, I walked into the office of his longtime attorney, and from that moment on, the game Victoria thought she had already won had only just begun. Leaving your home for the last time is a special kind of heartbreak. It's not just the walls and furniture you're walking away from. It's the memories, the echoes, the parts of yourself you buried in every corner. I wasn't just leaving a house. I was leaving 43 years of birthdays, anniversaries, Sunday dinners, and quiet nights in front of the fire. I was leaving the place where Robert proposed, the kitchen where Victoria took her first steps, the backyard where we planted a tree every spring. Victoria didn't flinch when she took it from me. She and Kevin showed up that Tuesday with 2 suitcases and a smug sense of finality. It wasn't a discussion. It was a decision. Theirs, not mine. "Mom," she said, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation, "Kevin got the promotion. We need to move into town immediately. This house is perfect for us. Perfect for us." She didn't even try to soften it anymore. "This is my home," I whispered, not trusting my voice to carry the full weight of my disbelief. That's when her mask slipped. Victoria looked at me, really looked at me, for the first time in years. But there was no warmth in her eyes, no hesitation, no guilt, just cold, polished confidence. "Actually, Mom," she said, folding her arms, "according to Dad's will, I inherited everything. The house, the investments, all of it." I blinked. That can't be right. Your father told me." "I've been letting you stay here out of kindness," she interrupted. "But it's time for you to find your own place." The air left my lungs. Kindness? She made it sound like I was a squatter. Then came the final blow, spoken so casually it made my skin crawl. "Go find somewhere else to die. You're useless now." I didn't cry. Not in front of her, not in front of Kevin, who stood quietly behind her like a chauffeur waiting to drive a corpse to the curb. Instead, I packed. It took less than an hour to condense a lifetime into 2 suitcases and a small box of photographs. Everything else, the furniture, the china, the jewelry Robert gave me over the years, stayed behind. It didn't feel like mine anymore. Victoria watched from the doorway, tapping her phone screen, clearly annoyed I was taking too long. "There's a senior complex on Maple," she said as Kevin loaded my bags into their BMW. "Very affordable. I'm sure they have openings. Affordable." My daughter was inheriting $33 million, and she was recommending I move into what was essentially a discount retirement facility. Kevin didn't look at me as he closed the trunk. "You'll love having your independence again," he said without a shred of irony. "No more worrying about property taxes or home repairs." No more home, he meant. As we pulled away, I stared out the window and watched the only life I'd ever known disappear behind manicured hedges. My house, their house, now shrinking in the rearview mirror. And then, silence. The Sunset Inn was every bit as depressing as it sounded. Thin walls, flickering lights, and a musty smell that clung to the sheets like a bad memory. Victoria handed me $200 in cash as she dropped me off, like a tip. "This should hold you over for a few days," she said, already turning away. "We'll transfer some funds once we sort through Dad's paperwork, some funds from my own inheritance." When the door closed behind her, I stood in the middle of the room staring at the sagging mattress and peeling wallpaper. I was 67 years old, a widow, alone, and suddenly homeless. I collapsed onto the bed and stared at the ceiling, trying to understand how everything had unraveled so fast, how the daughter I had loved, protected, sacrificed for, had thrown me away like expired medicine. And yet, somewhere in the haze of grief, a whisper of logic returned. Robert. He'd never do this to me. My husband, for all his stubbornness and old-fashioned views on money, had been meticulous, obsessively organized, especially about legal matters. We'd reviewed the will together years ago. He had shown me the documents, walked me through his intentions, explained everything, and I remembered clearly he had left the house to me. Most of the assets, too. So why? I sat up slowly, my heart pounding. What if Victoria had lied? What if the will she showed me wasn't real? The thought electrified me. The next morning, I walked 2 blocks to the nearest coffee shop and used their Wi-Fi to look up Robert's lawyer, Harrison Fitzgerald. He'd been with us for years, helped us buy the house, set up our accounts, everything. I called his office and booked an appointment. It cost me half the cash Victoria gave me, but I didn't care. If I was going down, I was going down swinging. 20 minutes later, I stepped into Harrison's office, nervous, exhausted, and clinging to one fragile hope. When the receptionist called my name, he looked up from his desk, his face lighting up with relief and concern. "Margaret," he said warmly, "I've been trying to reach you for weeks. Victoria told me you were traveling. I sat down, hands trembling, and met his eyes. "No, Harrison," I said, my voice steady for the first time in days. "I need you to tell me exactly what's in Robert's will." What he said next changed everything. Harrison Fitzgerald's office smelled like old wood and expensive paper. Everything about the place whispered history, dignity, and control, a sharp contrast to the chaos swirling inside me. I sat on the edge of a leather armchair, fingers clenched in my lap, while Harrison gray-haired, wire-rimmed glasses slipping down his nose, flipped through a thick file marked Sullivan, Robert J. "I've been calling your house," he said, eyes scanning the pages. "Victoria told me you were taking some time away, said the grief was too much, that you'd left town for a while." I didn't respond. I let the silence speak for me. "Margaret," he continued gently, "you were supposed to be present for the reading." Robert's will was read 2 weeks after his passing. My stomach twisted. "There was a reading?" He nodded slowly. "Of course." I gave Victoria the original and 3 copies, one of which was meant for you. I felt like I'd been punched. She told me Robert left her everything. That I wasn't included. Harrison stopped flipping. His expression shifted from confusion to alarm. "That's impossible." He pulled out a document and set it on the desk between us. The paper was thick, cream-colored, embossed with legal seals. At the bottom was Robert's signature, steady and precise. Notarized, witnessed, unmistakably authentic. "Your husband updated his will 6 months before he died," Harrison said. "He told me he was concerned about Victoria's attitude toward money, and more importantly, about her treatment of you." He cleared his throat and began reading aloud. "I, Robert James Sullivan, being of sound mind and body, do hereby bequeath to my beloved wife, Margaret Ann Sullivan, our primary residence located at 847 Oakwood Drive, including all furnishings and personal effects therein. Additionally, I leave to her 70% of all financial assets, investments, and accounts, estimated at the time of this writing to total approximately $23 million. I blinked. 70%. The house. $23 million. Harrison kept reading. To my daughter, Victoria Sullivan Hayes, I leave $10 million to be held in trust until her 45th birthday, with one condition. The funds shall be released only if she demonstrates continued treatment of her mother with dignity, respect, and care following my death. He paused. Let the weight of those words land. I felt everything at once: relief, shock, heartbreak, fury. Victoria hadn't just lied. She had knowingly violated the one condition her father placed on her inheritance, and in doing so, she had forfeited everything. I was shaking. She gave me $200 in cash, I whispered, barely able to speak. She said I should find a senior complex. That she was being generous. Harrison's jaw tightened. Margaret, that's elder fraud and potentially felony-level abuse. What Victoria did, if she forged or concealed this will, it's criminal. But she had legal documents, I stammered. She showed me papers with signatures, statements, likely from an outdated draft. Or worse, faked. He rose from his desk and opened a drawer, pulling out a manila envelope. This is a certified copy, he said, handing it to me. Your husband was meticulous. He updated everything for this exact reason. He suspected she might try something. I clutched the envelope like it was oxygen. All this time. While I sat alone in a budget motel, while I questioned my sanity and my worth, while my daughter celebrated her ill-gotten victory. Robert had already protected me. He'd seen it coming. He'd planned for it. And now, with the clause triggered, the full $33 million, the house, the assets, the trust, were mine. Victoria had outplayed herself. In her rush to seize control, she had tripped over the one line her father had drawn. All she had to do was treat me with kindness. Pretend, even. But she couldn't. She didn't know how. The silence between me and Harrison was heavy. Then he asked, carefully, "What would you like to do next?" I looked at him, eyes clearer than they'd been in weeks. Call the banks. Freeze everything she thinks she controls. Then call the police. I think it's time my daughter learned that actions have consequences. He nodded, already reaching for his phone. And just like that, the woman Victoria discarded 3 days ago, homeless, humiliated, and heartbroken, became the legal owner of everything she thought she had stolen. But I wasn't done, because Victoria hadn't just stolen from me. She'd tried to erase me, and now she was going to learn what it feels like to be invisible to the woman who just inherited every piece of power she thought belonged to her. In less than 3 hours, I went from homeless widow to the legal owner of a $33 million estate. The woman Victoria had tossed aside was now the one holding all the cards. But this wasn't just about money anymore, it was about justice. And I wasn't about to let my daughter slither away unscathed. Harrison called in a private investigator, the same one Robert had used over the years for business vetting and background checks. Apparently, Robert didn't just plan for rainy days, he built an ark. We also contacted the police. The detective assigned to my case was a sharp-eyed woman named Rodriguez, with a no-nonsense tone and the kind of stare that could melt granite. She reviewed everything. The forged documents Victoria had shown me, the missing copies of the will, the $200 in hush cash. This wasn't an impulsive decision, she said flatly. This was planned. Carefully. Possibly with assistance. You think Kevin helped her? I asked. She didn't hesitate. Almost certainly. By the end of the day, every bank account tied to Robert's estate had been frozen, every investment portfolio locked down, every utility account Victoria had transferred into her name suspended pending verification. The trap had been sprung. And right on cue. At exactly 3:47 p.m., my phone rang. Victoria. Her voice was tight, clipped, panicked. "Mom?" "Where are you? Something's wrong. The banks are saying all of Dad's accounts are frozen. They're not letting me access anything." I took a slow breath, letting the silence hang heavy before answering. "I'm sitting in Harrison Fitzgerald's office," I said evenly. "Do you remember him?" "Dad's lawyer? The one who read the real will?" dead silence on the other end, then stammering, "Mom, I don't know what you think you've discovered, but..." "I discovered you're a liar and a thief, Victoria. Wait, I also discovered that your father was smarter than both of us gave him credit for. He knew what you'd try to do. He just didn't know how fast you'd prove him right." Her tone shifted, from fake shock to forced sympathy. "Mom, you've been under so much stress. Maybe someone's manipulating you. These lawyers, this detective..." "Victoria," I said sharply, "don't insult me further." She paused, then tried one last angle. "Look, let's just meet somewhere, talk this through. We can figure something out." "Oh, we'll meet," I said, "in court." "You wouldn't press charges against your own daughter." I didn't raise my voice, didn't cry, didn't beg. I simply said the words I'd been holding in for too long. "Watch me." That night at 8:30 p.m., while enjoying dinner at a 5-star restaurant with Kevin and another couple, Victoria was arrested. Detective Rodriguez told me she made a scene-demanded her real lawyer, who turned out to be Kevin's golf buddy with zero experience in criminal law. Kevin? He was picked up the next morning at his office. Apparently, the forensic team traced the forged will to a document printer owned by his firm. As it turns out, Kevin had a hobby creating false investment prospectuses. Forgery was just another line on his criminal resume. When Harrison told me the news, I didn't smile, but I did breathe a little easier. I returned to the house the next day, my house, and for the first time in 43 years, I slept in the master bedroom. Victoria had already moved her things in. Robert's side of the closet was gone, replaced by racks of designer shoes and handbags. I packed everything into garbage bags and left them on the porch, let her collect them after bail. The next morning, Harrison called with updates. "Victoria's bail is set at $50,000, he said. "Kevin's at $200,000. The judge wasn't impressed with his background." "Will she find someone to pay it?" I asked. "Doubtful. All her accounts are frozen. Same for Kevin." I walked through the house, seeing it with fresh eyes. For decades, it had been a shrine to Robert, his tastes, his decisions, his presence. But now it was mine. Victoria had planned to gut the kitchen. I decided to build a sunlit art studio instead. She wanted to turn Robert's office into a wine cellar. I turned it into a reading room. Every decision was mine. Every choice an act of reclamation. Then came the call that shifted everything again. A local news station, a reporter asking if I'd be willing to speak about what they called a growing epidemic. Elder financial abuse by adult children. At first I declined, but then she said something that stopped me cold. "Your story could help protect others like you, Mrs. Sullivan. People who feel powerless, people who've been told they don't matter anymore." I thought about it all. The motel, the lies, the betrayal, the strength I didn't know I had until I had no other choice. I picked up the phone and said, "Let's talk." Because this story, it wasn't just mine anymore. The doorbell rang at exactly 7 a.m. I hadn't slept much the night before, not from fear, but anticipation. Through the window, I saw her, Victoria, still in yesterday's clothes, makeup smudged, hair messy. She looked like she hadn't slept either, but not because she was grieving, because her world was crumbling. I opened the door, but I didn't step aside. "Mom, please," she said, voice hoarse. "We need to talk." I looked her up and down, her designer coat now wrinkled, her eyes red, her composure gone. "We talked already," I replied calmly. "You told me to find somewhere to die. I found somewhere to live instead." She flinched, then stepped back like the words physically hit her. "I made mistakes," she whispered. "Terrible mistakes. But I'm still your daughter." I tilted my head. "Are you?" Because daughters don't forge legal documents to steal from their mothers. Daughters don't evict their grieving parents and send them off with cash like they're tipping a bellhop. "I wasn't stealing," she cried. She stopped, searching for a word that didn't sound criminal. "You were what, Victoria?" I pressed. "Misguided. Confused? Generous? Because if you say you were protecting me one more time, I swear—" She broke down, real tears this time. Not the performance tears she'd used all her life to manipulate her father, her husband, me. "I didn't know how to handle it," she sobbed. "All that money, all that pressure." Kevin said, "There it is," I interrupted. Kevin said. She looked away. I reached into my cardigan and pulled out my phone. 6 months before your father died, he recorded this, just in case her eyes locked on the screen. "No." "Yes," I said and pressed play. Robert's voice filled the morning air. "If you're hearing this, Victoria, then I was right to be concerned. I loved you, but I didn't trust you with your mother's well-being. If you've mistreated her, then everything I left you is gone. And you'll know exactly why Victoria dropped onto the porch steps, sobbing. The kind of sobs that shake the whole body, the kind of grief that isn't about loss but shame." "He hated me," she whispered. "No," I said gently. "He loved you enough to hope you'd prove him wrong. You chose to prove him right instead." She looked up at me. Mascara streaked her cheeks. Her voice cracked. "What happens now?" I took a breath. "Now, you face the consequences. You face the fraud charges, the investigation, the fact that your children will grow up knowing why their mother went to prison." Her face collapsed. "Mom, please." "Think about them. Think about the grandchildren. Think about our family." "I am thinking about them," I said coldly. "I'm thinking about how you never did." She stood slowly, trying to reclaim a shred of dignity. "I never meant for it to go this far." I nodded. "I believe you. But wanting money doesn't justify ruining someone else's life." She sniffled. "What can I do to fix it?" I didn't blink. "You can admit what you did was wrong, not complicated, not misunderstood, not emotionally charged, wrong. And then you can face the punishment with some dignity instead of trying to charm your way out like always." She said nothing, just nodded. For the first time, I saw not the spoiled child I had raised, but a woman staring into the mirror of her own failures. 3 days later, Kevin's mother showed up at my door. Eleanora Hayes, impeccably dressed, pearls at her throat. She carried entitlement like a perfume. "Margaret," she said like we were old friends, "we need to talk." "This situation has gotten out of hand," I let her in, curious to hear what twisted story she'd brought with her. "Kevin made mistakes," she began, "but prosecuting him? That seems vindictive." I smiled politely. "Your son helped steal my home, my inheritance, and tried to silence me with blackmail. He was following Victoria's lead." He didn't understand. "No, Mrs. Hayes," I interrupted. "He understood exactly. He forged documents. That's not following a lead. That's felony conspiracy." She exhaled dramatically, then leaned forward. "Our family is prepared to offer a settlement, $2 million. In exchange, you drop the charges against Kevin $2 million to buy my silence." I stood. "Mrs. Hayes, tell your son this. I'm not interested in settlements. I'm interested in justice." She stood too, smoothing her skirt. "I understand. But be careful. Digging too deep into the past, you may not like what you find." She turned to leave, then paused. "Are you sure you know everything about your husband's business dealings?" I froze. "Good day, Eleonora." She left with the grace of a woman who believed she'd planted a seed of doubt, but all she really did was ignite something deeper, because I hadn't asked many questions about Robert's work, not for years, and now I needed to, because this wasn't over yet. And the next truth waiting to be uncovered might shatter everything I thought I knew, not just about Victoria, but about the man I had loved for 43 years. 6 months ago, I was sleeping on a lumpy motel mattress with nothing but a shoebox of memories and 2 suitcases of clothes. Today, I'm sitting at my kitchen table in a home I now call mine, drinking coffee from my favorite mug, reviewing investment reports from my new financial advisor, Dr. Sarah Chen. The sunlight filters through freshly installed windows, warming countertops I chose myself. No one else's taste, no one else's permission. Your portfolio's thriving, Sarah says with a soft smile. The charitable foundation is fully funded and the scholarship program's already selected its first recipients. I nod, heart full in a way money can't explain. We called it the Margaret Sullivan Foundation for Elder Protection, and in 6 short months, we've helped over 200 seniors navigate legal battles against financial abuse from their own families. The letters we receive would break your heart. My son took my pension and disappeared. My daughter convinced me to sell my house, then evicted me. I thought they loved me until the money ran out. I see myself in every one of them, but I also see something else: power. The quiet, hidden kind that blooms when you decide to stop apologizing for existing. That's what I want my legacy to be. Not the fortune Robert left behind, but the strength I discovered after being discarded. I've used $15 million of my inheritance to fund legal aid, policy reform, and awareness campaigns. We're not just helping people survive abuse, we're changing laws so it's harder to happen in the first place. Netflix recently finalized a deal to turn my story into a limited series. Tentative title, The Mother's Revenge. I didn't choose that title, but maybe, in some way, it's fitting. Not revenge in the way Victoria would understand. Harsh, petty, performative. But a deeper kind. A life built in spite of those who tried to break me. Victoria and Kevin are each serving 18-month sentences in separate federal facilities. The media called it a modern tragedy of wealth and betrayal. But for me, it was a necessary reckoning. Their children, my grandchildren, live with Kevin's parents now. I've requested supervised visits when they're older, not to repair what Victoria destroyed, but to make sure they know they were never the mistake. Victoria has written me 17 letters from prison. I read the first few. At first, she blamed everyone but herself. Then she tried pity, then guilt. Eventually, she started apologizing, but I stopped opening them. Some relationships, once broken, aren't rebuilt with ink and paper. They require something far rarer: accountability. Sarah asked me the other day if I ever missed her, the daughter I used to know. I told her honestly, I miss who I thought she was, not who she became. We paused, then I added, and maybe I miss the version of me who thought love alone was enough. Because that's the truth most mothers learn too late. Love is powerful, but boundaries are sacred. The Margaret who got evicted from her own home didn't know that. The Margaret sitting here now, she knows exactly what she's worth. A few weeks ago, I opened Robert's study, now my art studio, and began painting again. It's something I gave up when Victoria was born, something I told myself I'd return to. Someday came. On the easel, there's a self-portrait. Not of me as I was, but of who I've become. A woman standing in sunlight. Strong posture, eyes forward, face set not in bitterness, but resolve. She looks nothing like the grieving widow from the motel room. She looks like someone who rebuilt her life from ashes and planted something beautiful in the space Betrayal once lived. Sometimes, people ask if I regret how things turned out, the court cases, the public attention, the estrangement. But here's what I've learned. You can't always choose how people treat you, but you can choose what you do next. You can choose to stay silent, or you can choose to speak for others who haven't found their voice yet. You can choose to crumble, or you can choose to rise. I chose the latter, and if Victoria ever wants to re-enter my life, she won't find the woman she once bullied. She'll find this woman, whole, unafraid, and holding the door shut until true change walks through it. Because forgiveness without change isn't healing, it's surrender. And I've surrendered enough for one lifetime. Some stories make you cry. Some stories make you angry, but every once in a while, a story makes you stronger. Margaret's journey wasn't just about money. It was about dignity, about learning. After 43 years of silence, that strength isn't about who shouts the loudest, but who rises the highest when no one expects them to. So if you've ever been underestimated, if you've ever been told to stay quiet, step aside, or be grateful for the scraps, let this be your reminder. You are not disposable. Your story isn't over. And sometimes, the best revenge is simply becoming everything they never believed you could be. If this story moved, you leave a comment. Share your truth. Someone out there needs to hear it. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. Because your voice, it matters more than you know.